Nip It Away Dharma Talks.
Talk 6, 8th of July 2012. Right Effort, Part 2. Professor Geoffrey Hunt talks about techniques in practicing right effort.
For those of you who are new, we follow the Noble Eightfold Path teachings. This is just a way of entering into the teachings of the Buddha. At a later stage, we don't need to think in this sort of clear-cut 1, 2, 3, 4 sort of way, but it's very useful for getting a handle on the Buddha's teachings holistically. So what we do is every session we go through one element of the Noble Eightfold Path, which begins with right understanding, then right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration, and then you're back at right understanding. And the discussion's also following the same topic. So where are we now? Right, today's talk continues with right effort, which we talked about previously. I now want to say something about the Buddha's techniques in regard to right effort. And if you remember, he divides right effort into those states of mind which are hindrances to our following this path, and those states of mind which are helpful in our following this path. So what he's saying is we do need to make an effort in following this path, which is not really surprising. We put a lot of effort into many, many things in life, and often we don't consider whether it's fruitful effort. In fact, we may be making a lot of effort which adds up to our making ourselves very unhappy or even destroying ourselves and even those around us sometimes. So it's really important to consider what we're putting our energy into. And a large part of the Buddha's teaching on effort, as I've already said, is to think about non-effort. That is not doing something as opposed to doing it. That is letting go of a lot of the things that we are very attached to in life and in work. So it's about, if you like, letting go, but it's also about using the energy that we do have in a fruitful way. Fruitful means fruitful to our developing wisdom, our developing compassion for ourselves and others, developing peace of mind, developing our full human potential, because we have a lot more potential than we might think that we have. Now, what are the techniques that the Buddha gives us? On the one hand, we have hindrances, that is, states of mind which hinder the development of our understanding. And these are desire, ill will, apathy, worry, and doubt. Those are the 5 hindrances. The opposites of these are 5 helpers or 5 facilitators. So the opposite of desire or wanting more of stuff is letting go, being more generous, being more grateful. The opposite of ill will would be goodwill and kindliness. The opposite of apathy would be to engage one's energy in doing things for others, and indeed to develop oneself as a full human being. The opposite of anxiety would be tranquility, or peacefulness, or equanimity and balance. And the opposite of doubt would be commitment, but commitment to something which is fruitful in the sense in which I've described it. How do we actually do this? It's all very well for me to talk about it, isn't it? But how do we do it? Because we can all nod our heads and say, yes, well, I agree with you with that. But how are we going to bring about this shift in our attitude and in our way of life? The Buddha is very practical. He doesn't want you to start with believing anything. He wants you to do something. He wants you to do something, if you like, on yourself, to come to understand yourself. So he's very, very practical. And I often say that the Buddha doesn't have any teaching other than a set of instructions on how we can transform ourselves in the direction of wisdom, compassion, and peace. So let's go back to the 5 hindrances. Desire, wanting stuff, wanting to be more powerful, wanting to be more important, wanting to have more stuff, wanting to be more attractive, wanting to be bodily perfect, wanting to live forever, basically. And the advertisements sell this to us every day because they want us to buy stuff And the advertisers know how we work. They know very well how we work, and they know how to catch us out, make us crave and want more and more. How can we deal with this hindrance? What is a practical technique for dealing with it? Well, the Buddha's got some suggestions here. And these suggestions apply to all the 5 hindrances. The first suggestion is what you might call noticing the very first sign of something. The sign is the very first trigger that will set you off wanting something. We can develop our mindfulness and our attentiveness in such a way, and our self-understanding in such a way, that I notice when I am starting to want something. It could be anything. It could be a bigger house, a bigger car, more money, more status, a member of the opposite sex. It could be anything. Big chocolate cake. Whatever. There must be a beginning to it. There must be a seed. A point at which it starts. And of course, when it starts, it can grow. And when it grows, it can take control of you. And that is why we see so much obsessiveness in our society. Even a lifetime clinging to something. Now, not all of this is destructive. Of course, a lot of it is harmless. If I would really like to play the violin well, and play in an orchestra, there's absolutely no harm in that. I suppose even that could become harmful if I become terribly obsessive and hurt a lot of people around me because of that. But I'm not saying that absolutely everything that we may want is necessarily bad. But we know that there is a danger in craving and wanting, especially when it's around power and pride. These are generally not very good things to want. Now the Buddha says there's always a first sign. You see, there's always a first thing which will trigger it off. Like, you're not thinking about the opposite sex. You go onto the tube station and there's a big advert, 10 feet high, with a half-naked model, male or female, and immediately, that's the sign, isn't it? You've just had breakfast, you're not in the least interested in this matter, and there's this half-naked person with a bottle of beer between their legs or whatever it is, and this is the human mind. We'll be off on one, because there's the sign. I'm not saying it must happen, but it will happen a lot, which is precisely what the advertisers know. And they want to associate that body beautiful with the beer that they want you to buy, or the insurance, or the holiday, or whatever it is. And before you know what, while I'm waiting for the train, I'm starting to fantasize a little bit. That's what the advertisers want. Can I get a grip on this? Can I notice this? Can I notice the very first sign that gets me going? It doesn't have to be a visual sign. It could be something that somebody says. It could be something that just happened, a situation. The very first thing that will make my mind do this with it, like what I'm doing with my hands, gripping, grasping, wanting something. The Buddha says if we can do that, if we can notice the first sign, which comes through developing mindfulness, that is the best place to let go of it. Let's take an analogy. If I go camping and there's a lot of dry grass around me and there's danger of fire, there might be a notice up there that says, beware of fire. Now, what is the first sign that there's a fire? It's smoke, isn't it? Probably smoke somewhere. If you notice the smoke, there's a fire. And if you don't do anything about it, it's going to develop. And before you know what, the entire forest is on fire because of one little spark, and maybe inaction on the part of someone who saw the first smoke. This is the situation we're in as human beings. The world is on fire. The environment is being destroyed. The climate is turbulent. This is our own behavior coming back and hitting us on the back of the head, because we never noticed the first sign of it and we never did anything about it as it developed. All due to, you might say, a lack of attention. A lack of attention can definitely destroy you. If you're driving 70 miles per hour down the motorway, in the moment it takes to look at your radio face and change the dial, which might be 2 seconds, you've probably travelled several hundred feet. A lot could happen in that space of time. So noticing the very first sign, but that takes training. You see, it's not easy to do because we're creatures of habit. We're creatures of habit. We just react. We just react to the situation because we're already trained ourselves to get what we want. So we see a sign and we go for it. We don't hesitate. There's no decision and no choice. So that is the first thing the Buddha says we need to develop as a technique, noticing the very first sign. The sign of wanting, the sign of ill will, the sign of worry and anxiety. Something will trigger that off. It doesn't come from nowhere. Something will trigger it off. It's that we don't notice because we haven't learned to pay attention to it. So if I'm lying in bed at night, I'm about to go to sleep, a little thought comes into my head. It might be, what did so-and-so mean when he said such and such at work yesterday? Was he having a go at me? Is there some problem I don't know about at work? Right, here we go. I'm not now thinking, that's a sign that I'm going to get anxious and then I'll be awake for the next 2 hours. I start following that and then I will be awake for 2 hours. Building it up into my mind, into all sorts of scenarios. But if I've trained myself, I'll say, don't want you, thank you, go away, let go of that sign immediately, turn away, just turning the mind away from it. Physically you turn away from something you don't like to see, something unpleasant on the footpath, turn your mind away from it. We can do this with anything. But you've got to notice the first sign, turn your mind away from it. That's if you catch it early. Now what if this little fire has already started? It gets a little bit more complicated. So we've got a little bit of a fire starting. Well, there are all sorts of things we can do with fires. We can stamp it out with our foot, we can throw water over it, etc., etc. The best thing, of course, if you're camping, is to clear the ground around you so there is no combustible material around you. In a way, this is what the Buddha says too. It's best to live in conditions, provide yourself with conditions in which you're not going to go off on one, as I've put it, be attracted by something or other. We could talk about that at length. Right, so let's say it's starting to arise, this wanting or whatever it is, ill will is starting to arise. Another thing we can do is to divert our attention away from it. Diverting your attention means putting your attention on something else. So instead of my looking at the advert of Body Beautiful, I can immediately turn away and put my mind on something else. I can make myself do that. It's quite easy at the first stages. It gets more difficult the further down the line you go in following a craving, until it becomes virtually impossible, because then you're an addict. You're addicted to X, Y, or Z. Then getting away from it is well nigh impossible without a lot of help. Divert attention. Put something else in your mind. Could be anything. It could be anything, as long as that itself is not going to be another object of craving. Put something pleasant in your mind. And that is the third technique, is to put the opposite of whatever it is. If it's a hindrance, then put the opposite of it into your mind. Now, how would that work? Well, that's going to work sometimes. None of these things work all the time, but all of these things will work on occasion. So what would be the opposite? Let's say I meet somebody, a game that I don't like very much, and every time I meet them, they tend to get on my nerves a bit. Or maybe I look down on them slightly, for whatever reason. Can I notice that? Can I notice what is going on in my state of mind when I can see this person again? My state of mind is arising. Now what I can do now, this third technique, is do the opposite to what my mind is doing. My mind now is saying, rejecting. don't like you or start to think of negative aspects of this person, what if I did the opposite? What if I look for something that I do like in that person, or something that I think is admirable in that person? So let's give an example. You might think, I don't like this person, but on the other hand, they do some voluntary work to help the blind or the aged or whatever. Or they work for the Red Cross on the weekend. Or this person's a good mother or a good grandmother. Or this person is really a great musician and a good teacher of music. Or there will be something. It could be something small. It could be that they're good at growing vegetables and they're quite generous with their vegetables. There are very few people that are 100% bad. And of course, what is bad and what is not bad is usually pretty relative anyway. But it is a good mental technique which works sometimes when you're faced with something that you're developing a negative, hindering state of mind about, to substitute it with its opposite, insofar as you can do that. And there's another technique which marshal the forces of revulsion, which means you're now doing the opposite of what I just said. Because you're being strongly attracted to something, find something revolting about it. The most revolting one I've ever read in any Buddhist teachings is when you're being attracted to an attractive member of the opposite sex, is to remember how they look like inside. And when I first read this, I thought, yeah. But that's precisely the point. That is precisely the point. Is that how it's meant to work? Is that our insides are not very attractive, really. There's all kinds of smelly stuff in there, and phlegm and fluids, and that's going to put you off anything, isn't it, really? You see what I mean? I think you all get the point. Now, I'm not saying we dwell on it, and I'm not saying the Buddha's, trying to make us feel revolted about life. He's saying if you've got a problem being attracted in that area, think of its negative side. That'll put you off. It's true about almost anything. Alcohol, cigarettes, watching too much TV, eating hamburgers. There is a revolting side to any of those if it's really becoming an issue for you and you want to. So you see, what we are learning to do is to deploy the mind in a way which is fruitful. We are learning little techniques, like a toolbox, by which gradually I'm training myself to go in that direction and not in that direction. Now, what about the positives, right? The positive states of mind, the facilitative states of mind, with things like generosity, kindliness, tranquility, helpfulness. Can I do something about those? Are there techniques for developing those? Yes. What about, let's see, I'm always in a state of want, right? I've tended to be grasping stuff. What about the opposite being generosity and gratitude? I know that I can actually take advantage of that. Can I make myself be more grateful? Can I remember to say thank you to people? Not only say thank you, but can I show them that I am thankful by giving them something? It's not easy to do if I feel slightly resentful towards someone or if I don't really care about them. But see what a transforming effect it has if you do it. When you give somebody something even quite small, they light up. They've been given something and they didn't expect it from you. Just that one little thing can change the whole relationship. The way they look at you, now the way you look at them, the whole dynamic starts changing. Just because you've given them something, however small, or you've said something kind, or you've helped them with something, however small. These are things that we somehow forget to do. We don't think that they work, or maybe we just never thought of it. Of course, we will do those things with our favorite people, but couldn't we generalize and do it more widespread way with more people, with a wider circle of people, until it becomes us, until I become a generous, grateful, helpful person, and that starts transforming everything around me. It's not then just about me. My family will feel different. My friends will feel different. The more of us are doing it, the more society starts to feel different. We have a helpful society of solidarity and kindliness, instead of one that's competitive and destructive. You see, if a small change in the direction of grasping can make a difference, as it does for a corporation manufacturing soap, then every little individual change in the direction of helpfulness, when added up, will also make a difference. Because when you see the advert for the beer or the soap or whatever it is, you might go and buy it. It's had that impact on you, but it's having an impact on lots of other people. And having an impact on lots of other people will have an impact on society. But why shouldn't it work the other way around? If one little change in the direction of your wanting something is going to make a big difference, then one little change in the direction of your not wanting it or wanting something different is also going to make that difference. So look at the immense power we have. Even as consumers, we have this immense power, but we don't deploy it. We let the advertisers rule our minds. If we said, wait a minute, I know what you're up to and I'm not falling for that, well, I'll find out for myself, thank you very much, go away. Don't connect everything with sex and food and power. The whole thing would collapse. And there wouldn't be so much damage to the environment and to other creatures and so on. And above all, just damage, to ourselves as individuals. So yes, there are techniques. And what about, say, the apology? It's hard to apologize, isn't it? When one realizes one has, because of desire, ill will, laziness, worry, and doubt, you've hurt somebody. What is it that gets in the way of an apology? Pride. That's what gets in the way of an apology. It's very easy. It's ego that gets in the way of an apology. Its ego is exactly the thing we're trying to work on. Apologize. Say, I'm sorry, I got it wrong. Okay. Doesn't matter how the other person reacts. You would hope that they would say, okay, I accept your apology. If they don't, well, that's their problem. They got to work on themselves as well. But you're working on yourself. So try it. See, don't let ego and pride get in the way of making an apology. Being helpful, being kindly. All of these things are positive things that we can do. Now, unfortunately, I think it's true to say that we live in a rather cynical society and one of low trust. We've put ourselves there. And it's a vicious circle. Because when I don't trust people, I don't feel inclined to be generous or gratitude. I've put myself in a defensive mode. And when that spreads and we're all defensive, is that a better society or a worse one? It's a worse one. So someone has to take the initiative somewhere of trying to create a virtuous circle, of moving it back upwards again towards trust. And this is what this teaching is about. And that's why it's called right effort.
New Buddha Way approaches meditation as a way of life, letting go of east and west, past and future, and starting afresh here and now. To find out more, visit www.newbuddhaway.org.